Mr. Fletcher.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to declare a personal interest as a director on the council's wholly owned company, Lichfield West Midlands Traded Services, please.
Thank you. I'll await the onslaught of further declarations. Ms. Dove.
Thank you, Chair. Same declaration of interest as myself, a personal interest as Director of Lichfield West Midlands Traded Company in reference to the future of the HR paper. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Farrell.
Personal interest as the chair of the company.
Thank you. Any more for any more? No, as ever, if they arise during discussion, please do interrupt at the earliest opportunity to get that interest declared. We are going to rejiggle the agenda this evening just so that Councillor Strachan is able to present his papers. He's got items 3, 4 and 6 on the agenda. So we will we'll park those for the meantime until Councillor Strachan arrives. Item number 5 on the agenda tonight, then, which will be the first item, is the interim policy NR3. We are withdrawing that paper this evening. There's been an update to the legislation, which means we need a slight review. But Councillor Wilcox, if you want to give us a précis of why it's being pulled and perhaps the route through, that'd be much appreciated.
Thank you very much, Chairman. We were so close to bringing this paper this evening, and this would have been my first paper on this cabinet for some time. But nevertheless, the interim policy NR3 has been pulled, basically because central government have released further information and secondary legislation on this last week. And there's quite a lot of information that's been released, and we thought it's only right that we do the right look into it, make sure there's nothing in there that's going to trip us up before we bring this paper forward. But it will be coming in the fullness of time. But at this moment now, we think we just need to recall, look at what we're going to be putting in there, make sure it fits what we want as a district council in taking this very important policy forward. And just on the back of that, Mr. Chairman, if I may just indulge, if any members of this authority are watching this production, sounds a bit like a theatre, are watching us this evening, just to remind you that tomorrow evening is the mop-up session for anybody that wishes to come along and hear about the really exciting recycling campaigns being launched beginning of next year, together with the talking around the biodiversity and the climate change and the really exciting plans we have next year to move this item forward. There will be, as always, cake and biscuits and refreshments to keep people occupied whilst they're here. And that's tomorrow night at 6 o'clock in this very room. So without further ado, Mr. Chairman, I'll leave it at that and pass back to you for the next item.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Councillor Wilcox. So then the next item on the agenda tonight is item number 7, which is a Cinema for Lichfield District update. Just take this opportunity to remind you of several things. One is that we have separate appendix to the paper, which is at item number 9 in the agenda pack. If any question relates to any information contained within that appendix, can we please separate that out for confidential session at the end? If we need to pull that in earlier, so if we can not avoid having that conversation earlier on, then we'll move into confidential at an earlier stage. But I'm very keen to delay that as much as we possibly can, so if we can get all the questioning out nice and early with avoiding going into that'd be appreciated. Secondly, is that we have some updated recommendations, which you should have a paper copy of with you. And thirdly, is that the chair of our Overview and Scrutiny Committee is here with us this evening, Councillor Norman, to give us live and direct feedback from Overview and Scrutiny Committee, which we very much appreciate you being here, Councillor Norman. Councillor Smith, this is your paper. I will hand over to you.
Thank you, Doug. Yeah, so I'm actually really pleased to bring this paper because it's well, as it's entitled, it's an update on the cinema. So I'm just going to give it, if you bear with me, I'm going to give a little bit of potted history of where we are and what we got to and what we need to do. So October last year, full council agreed for us to go into an LLP, a partnership with Evolve Estates. Evolve Estates are the organisation that run and own the Bakers Lane 3 Spire shopping centre. And other F&B outlets within the Debenhams building at the top of Bakers Lane. This involved investment from the LDC side of 5.7 million to match the investment of cash and property assets, i.e. the building, from Evolve Estates. Property assets being the ex-Debenhams building at the top of 46 Bakers Lane. Council approved that resolution, and we got the go ahead to proceed on that basis. This will really have a big positive place shaping effect on our city and the wider district. It will make a big difference to the nighttime economy, and it will really boost that shopping centre. I think if anyone's had a walk down there recently, they'll see that since Evolve Estates has been evolved, there's hardly any vacant premises. In fact, I think the ones that are vacant are currently undergoing a negotiation for to be occupied. So it's looking really good down there. So a real positive contribution to the district. So why are we bringing this paper to cabinet now? Toward the end of the contract negotiations at the end of the summer this year, Evolve Estates approached us with 3 clauses that they wanted to resolve in the contract. And after a lot of talking and beating around, we got to the point where we had to resolve these three clauses to move forwards. These are all detailed in the paper. The first was that the council's valuation, or the independent value valuation, was incorrect and needed a revalue. This is Evolve Estates' words. 2, that all elements of the scheme are pre-let before the partnership is signed up. And 3, that the council commits to buy out Evolve Estates from the partnership 2 years after completion of the cinema. Now, when we talk about completion of cinema, we mean when the doors are open and we're watching films and selling popcorn in there. I say we're not. To be really clear, we won't be selling popcorn. Okay, the cinema operator will be operating the cinema. We will just be the landlord in the partnership. Anyway, the first 2 have been resolved through negotiation. Evolve Estates have now accepted our independent valuation of the asset, so all good there. It's the third point that this paper is all about. Essentially, after the 2 years, after the 2 years of opening, Evolve Estates looking out from the cinema part of that operation in Bakers Lane. The reason they want to buy the buyout clause are detailed in this paper, some in the confidential, some not in the confidential. But essentially, they are a commercial investment operator, not a council like us. They are purely about numbers, and they're purely about making double-digit investment returns. We're a council who, whilst we want to make investment returns, we also want to shape the place of Lichfield as well. Evolve absolutely want to be and will remain involved in the Three Spires site as owner of the retail units for the long term. We just need to remember they're a commercial, not public sector partner, with a different driver and imperative coming from their board to our council. We knew this when we agreed to create the partnership with them, and the relationship with them introduces expertise and an ability for them to make this project happen for us, which we'd otherwise ourselves struggle to deliver. But our imperative is to bring forward the long-awaited place shaping that everyone's been waiting for us to do and expects us to offer as part of our strategic plan. The different imperative does not make them any less of a partner in this venture or any less right partner to deliver the complex. Let's just remember that Evolve Estates own that shopping centre. They absolutely would want us to make a success of this venture moving forwards. They've had other options on that site, and they want to make a success of this venture. So just a little bit on the buyout. The buyout amount will be 3.5 to 3.9 million as per the paper, once we put some bonus and some buffer in there. As I say, 2 years after the completion. This covers Evolve Estates' cash investment into the project and a development cost to them to help us build the project. It does not cover and does not include the value of the asset, the Debenhams building that's in the LLP. That will remain the LLP, and we don't need to buy out that any further. There's more detail on that in the confidential appendix of this paper. Leader, there is also detail in the paper about how the buyout will be funded by us, and the payback times on 3 different scenarios, where I've got Simon and I've got Anthony who will give us more information on that as require. We took this paper to ONS last week, and their views have been noted or dealt with. And there's been a number of points. One main one was a review being done by the council's independent valuer to look at the viability of the scheme from an independent perspective. And there's 2 points in the there's one clause in the paper that talks about that. ONS are really keen that our cabinet decision, so was I, and we always were, our cabinet decision was subject to that report coming back and being favourable. Simon can put some numbers on the parameters on that. So just to be clear, one of my recommendations covers that. So I'm just going to go through the updated recommendations now as a result of our ONS meeting, and then if it's okay with you, Chair, I'm going to invite Steve in to just talk about some of the ONS recommendations. Then we can talk about whether we've got those covered as part of our discussion. So 2.1. Cabinet agrees and recommends to full council to agree the inclusion of the new buyout clause outlined in the background section. The clause would involve the buyout of Evolve Estates' interest in the joint venture partnership 2 years after the completion of the development. The clause, this is the important bit, the clause is subject to confirmation from the council's legal team and independent valuer that the valuation approach is in line with best practice and the price can be substantiated from a legal best value perspective. 2.2. Cabinet delegate authority to the leader and chief exec in consultation with the monitoring officer and the Section 151 officer to complete all contracts related to the venture to the partnership, subject to financial implications of all contracts being approved within our budgets. 2.3. Cabinet agrees and recommends to full council to update the MTFS to increase the budget in the capital programme by 3.9 million to reflect the central scenario cost, with funding initially based on the central scenario, including the financial implications section. The plan is for any borrowing need to be funded through internal borrowing, so not going out to borrow external, therefore not being subject to market borrowing rates. Part 2, to continue the approach that the MTFS is based on a neutral, no surplus or deficit capital receipts are included in budget position until more financial projections are provided for the business plan. So in other words, our MTFS revenue part of our MTFS would not be affected by this by this decision. 2.4. ONS, the ONS committee, Opening Executive Committee, continues to be involved in the scrutiny of key elements of this policy development along the way, including the business plan, which is mentioned in my report, which I will take that back to ONS when that's completed, and also the ownership model of the partnership in the 2 years' time, when either the buyout or the sell and we make up the difference is completed. This will enable members to fully understand the strategic, operational, and financial implications of the council becoming the sole owner of the cinema development and the impact on the MTFS. That's it from me at the moment. Thank you, Leader, as an intro. I'll take any questions with my team.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Do you want to bring in Councillor Norman at this point to give feedback from ONS before we move into questions?
Okay, thanks. I mean, it might sound a bit repetitive from what the Cabinet has said, but that's good synergy, I think, because it means he's reflecting what overview and scrutiny said, and the draft minutes will also show that. Can I just say, anybody with any Dutch connections here tonight, can I just wish them a happy St. Nicholas Day? The members considered the recommendations to table at tonight's meeting at Cabinet and sought clarification on the substantive item, namely the buyout clause, and the financial information and risk detailed in the report. I'm grateful to members of the committee that didn't repeat questions, asked impertinent questions, and I'm particularly grateful, obviously, to the Cabinet member, to the Section 151 officer, and others who actually did respond in kind, and there was no question of any question not being answered, or any questions in our head apart from the obvious one. We can't see into the future whether something will work or not, but that was good. I'm also grateful for the help I had with making sure as much could be in public as we could without causing a problem for ourselves. What I've said is that we were informed that the business plan would need to be approved before training begins, but that the development of the scheme would be focused on first, that the potential 3.999 million figure for the buyout included the Section 151 officer's recommendation to include possible extra costs detailed in the report. That the draft business plan would be shared with members of the committee, that the Cabinet's decision is fully dependent on the legal advice being sought, that the buyout clause would not take effect until the construction is done and the retail units are trading, not from when the contract is signed, and this will be defined very clearly in the contract, understand? That if the council decided not to purchase Evolve Estates shareholding, then it was recommended and agreed that the contract should include a commitment that Evolve will seek the best possible price when taking this to market. And regarding the potential external funding available via the Greater Birmingham and Solihull Local Enterprise Partnership, members would receive clarification on the figure referred to in the report. And the two specific recommendations we were suggesting to Cabinet to consider is that the possibility of dissolving the LLP should be included in the report, and that reference to the ownership model should be included in paragraph 3.17. And all questions put to officers and Cabinet members in attendance were responded to, and members were assured, in my view, by the answers given where there was certainty. And it was noted that the overview scrutiny would receive further reports, and that it was accepted that all information required would need to be in place for a decision to be made at next week's meeting of full council. The only correction I'm going to make to the Cabinet member who spoke before me was that the meeting might have seemed like last week, but actually it was only on Tuesday. No, it was last week, wasn't it? Yeah. I'm lost it myself. I've been so anyway. Sorry, Andy.
That's great. Thank you, Councillor Norman, and thank you. It's good to have you as chair of ONS here to directly feed your committee's views back. So we very much appreciate you taking time out to do that. Thank you. I am going to open up questions. Councillor Wilcox.
Thank you, Chairman. I was fortunate enough last week, it was last week, Councillor Norman, to be at overview and scrutiny to listen to the debate and the scrutinising of the report. And I have to say, Mr. Chairman, I think it's probably in this municipal year one of the best pieces of scrutiny I think we've seen in this council under this present chairman. Of course, there was good scrutiny under the previous chairman, but this chairman is excellent, and he conducted the meeting extremely well, very fairly, gave everybody the opportunity. And as I say, I think it was the best piece of scrutiny we have seen, and demonstrates the importance that this sort of information, these sort of big decisions that we're taking as a council, are actually scrutinised fully by members of the council. So I would applaud overview and scrutiny for doing that. I would also say at the same time, Mr. Chairman, we've been waiting a long time for this, and I see this as one part of a larger jigsaw. And part of that jigsaw is the fact that on the back of this, we need to make sure that we get the right food and beverage outlets who will undoubtedly draw attention and attraction to the cinema and vice versa. And I think it's the first step in actually doing something that the district can be extremely proud of in bringing this to the city and everything else that will flow from it. And, you know, I think it's an excellent paper, and I'll leave it to that for now, Mr. Chairman, let anybody else come in.
Thanks, Councillor Wilcox.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Mike. And if I could just say, I've from what I've seen so far, and from the list I've seen, I've got full confidence in Evolve Estates with the selection of the F&B outfits. The right level are definitely signing up. Yeah.
Thanks, Councillor Smith. Councillor Spestal.
Yeah, thank you. Without wanting to repeat some of the things that's already been said, I think it has been a very long time coming now. And I think that having some assurances this is definitely the final hurdle would be a good point to be able to make that comment now. Overridingly, I do think this is about the place shaping. And as far as I'm concerned, very supportive in the fact that this council isn't necessarily an investment bank. We are here for the residents of Lichfield District in its widest capacity. And the sooner we get this underway now, for me, the absolute better, which is why I'm keen to see this is definitely the final hurdle. If I could just ask one other question as well at this point. We've got the initially estimated underlined a few times throughout the report. When we come down to some of the numbers have changed actually, but on the financial implications, is there any particular reasoning behind why we've got that underlined that we think might be relevant at this point, or is that something that we should consider later? Thank you.
If I could just take the in terms of the final hurdle question, Janice, yeah, I've asked that question a lot, and Simon's reassured me because he's asked the question a lot, and we're very, very confident now. In fact, I understand that if council are willing to support this next week, we are ready to go with the contracts. Just needs the council support next week. Yeah. I'm going to let Anthony and or Simon answer the estimation question.
So the number that is in press releases of 3.5 million is a figure that Evolve Estates have quoted. There's two elements to that. There is an element that's variable, which depends on the build cost. They've estimated that at a particular figure, and there is an estimate which I believe is fixed, which is their profit element figure. So we focused on the variable element of it. We've based the figure on the budget that has been independently reviewed by a quantity surveyor and PricewaterhouseCoopers. Therefore, our number is higher than their number in that sense. In addition, we asked PricewaterhouseCoopers just to have a look at it from a stamp duty land tax perspective, because we're acquiring an interest in an asset or a share of an asset. And they believe there's a potential that we could have to pay stamp duty land tax. So we've built that estimate in at this stage. Now, there is a potential that that could be mitigated away, but we need to work with Evolve Estates on the due diligence and the actions they take, which will allow us to do that. But I think it's prudent at this stage to build those costs into the budget so that we're not continually coming back to Cabinet and Council for cost increases.
You happy with that? Yeah, carry on, please.
Very much so. And I think the word that you mentioned at the end there about prudent, I wouldn't expect anything different from yourself. And it's good to hear that we've got the clarity on there as well. Thank you very much for that detailed answer.
Thank you. Any more? Mark.
Thank you, Chairman. Just looking at the illustrative revenue budget implications, Anthony, and just looking at the optimistic, central and pessimistic, I just wanted to understand two lines there. The one that talks about the sinking fund, and then the one that talks about the capital financing costs. And obviously there's massive differences between the central and the pessimistic there. In relation to the sinking fund, wouldn't the figures in the sinking fund stay the same regardless whether it was optimistic, pessimistic or central, in as much as putting funding aside for that? Would be my first question, Chair.
Yeah, so not necessarily. It's quite difficult to do a sinking fund calculation, and I mentioned this at overview and scrutiny because we haven't got full visibility on the building and the condition of the building. So we've done 3 scenarios based on different values of the building and different sinking fund rates. So I think I said at overview and scrutiny committee that there is a prominent local authority with a significant commercial portfolio that sets aside 12% of their annual rental income into a sinking fund. In the 3 scenarios we've modelled at this stage, because of the uncertainty around the building, we've used 28% at the optimistic, 42% in the central and 50% in the pessimistic. Now, that is a lot higher than the 12% that another authorities use. But I think that's a prudent approach until we've got the full visibility on the building. If, for instance, they are too prudent, we can always reduce that down in any case. That again, that relates to the level of the borrowing need principally. So you can see the optimistic, the borrowing needs 56,000, then pessimistic, it's 2.7 million. That, if we've used a consistent asset life of 25 years, but if you divide those numbers by 25, you will get the bigger range. That's why it's a larger number. And in addition to that, you also the investment income that's foregone is larger, the higher the borrowing need.
Thanks, Mike. Just, I suppose, one from me, and I think there are plenty of experts that we've reached out to in order to get ourselves comfortable, I think, with the position that we're currently in. clearly there's a couple of tests that still need to be met before we can approve it at council, which I think we all appreciate. In terms of the ongoing service charge budgets, which is, I think, where things can get exciting, scary, one of the two. So I suppose, given that we've out of necessity leveraged external expertise, it's kind of getting us to this point, how comfortable are we that we either have the in-house expertise or we're able to leverage external expertise to get us into a good position around our service charge budgets? And perhaps that's a question for officers or Andy, if you want to take that.
I can have a go at that. So you're right, service charges can be a difficult area, especially if caps are put in place. So we've asked Aspinall Verdi, who are the valuers, the external valuers, to have a look at the service charge budgets for us. They've got better expertise than we have in this area. However, what I would say in terms of managing the risk around this area, one, the sinking fund could give us some cover on that. And the second point is what the recommendation that Councillor Smith read out, that we're taking a budget neutral approach here. So despite the fact, I think on the central scenario, it shows an excess of income over expenditure, we are not building that into the budget at this stage until we've got the full visibility over the business plan, the building, the condition, etc. So that gives us some headroom to manage those type of risks.
Understood. Thank you. In my very layman's term, I'd probably assess our current assessment of this as that we have underrepresented our potential incomings and perhaps overrepresented our outgoings, or we've assumed the worst in what's going out and assumed it'll be the way around, yeah. And we're still clear that there's sufficient headroom to get us through. Would that be a fair assessment, Anthony?
I'd probably use the term prudent.
Of course you would. Thank you. Any more questions on the non-confidential papers? And there's plenty for us to go after in confidential session as well. But at this point, are we all happy with, I think, what the recommendations are, particularly what is still to be sort of TBC, that there's some tests that need to be met before I think we can back this at full council? Are we clear of what those are and what we're agreeing on this evening? Brilliant. In which case, Councillor Smith, I'm going to go back to you. You've already read the recommendations out, so no need to read them out again. But can you move your recommendations, please?
I was going to say, Leader, I don't want to read those out again, but yeah, I'd like to move the recommendations on the written sheet, not the ones in the electronic copy, 2.1 to 2.4.
Great, thank you. All those in favour, you can indicate. That's great. That's unanimously carried. Thank you, Councillor Smith, and a big thank you to Mr. Thomas and Mr. Fletcher, and anyone else who has been involved in pulling those numbers and legals together, because I know it is an ongoing uphill struggle. So we do appreciate that. Okay, let us then return and get back into order this evening. Back to agenda item number 3, Councillor Strachan. Great to have you with us. I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Leader. Sorry I was late. I'm afraid I was stuck in court this afternoon. Starting up then with the calculation of the business rates, the council tax and any surplus and deficit estimates. This is hopefully a fairly simple and technical paper to begin with. As part of the ongoing financial management of this authority, we are required to make formal estimates of business rates, of the council tax base, and of any projected collection fund surpluses or deficits. This has to be by deadlines as specified in paragraph 1.2, and the final one, the deadline is kind of dictated by the timing of financial settlements, as you see in 1.5. And so tonight I'm seeking delegations from you to carry out that work so that the council meets its legal obligations. To put some flesh on the bones, though, I'm pleased to report that both the council tax and business rate collection funds are forecast to be in surplus. The council tax surplus is £864,000, of which Lichfield's share will be £91,000. And the business rates collection fund surplus is 2.8 million, which would give Lichfield District Council a share of 1.13 million. This is thanks in large part to the absolutely exemplary efforts of the Revenues and Benefits team led by Nikki Begley, whose performance remains top in Staffordshire and is amongst the best in the county, in the country. I can also reassure Cabinet, though, that rather than just taking money away from people, we also continue to operate with a large degree of sensitivity, and where people are struggling to pay, we are assisting them with that with a number of schemes, but most prominently, of course, the Council Tax Support Scheme, which you kindly approved last year, and discretionary reliefs. Property growth does mean that the council tax base is larger than expected by just under 100 properties, although the relatively low level of council tax retention, because our share is 9.1%, does only result in £18,750 of additional income from growth alone. You'll see the actual surpluses and the shares between authorities shown in the chart at 3.13 and 3.14. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Councillor Strachan. Any questions on this? This is a fairly straightforward calculation, technical paper, isn't it? The numbers are the numbers. Yeah, go ahead, Councillor.
Yeah, thank you. It's a comment more so than a question. Councillor Strachan, I think, has gone through the detail that we need to on there, but I think it's worthwhile going back to emphasise the impact of the discounts and exemptions that have gone through, and we can see those in the table at 3.7. When we start looking at the support that we're providing, especially, that it is having a tangible impact. And I just think that's something that when we discuss some of these matters at committee and certainly in the chamber, we can see how they're actually going out to help some of our residents. So I think as well as the congratulations that you've done already for the team there, for me personally, is a well done as well. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's no further questions, then I'll hand over to you, Rob, for your recommendations.
Thank you, Leader. I move recommendations 2.1, 2.2 and 2.3 standing in my name.
Thank you. Those in favour, if you can indicate it. Thank you. That is unanimous. Thank you, Councillor Strachan, and thank you to Mr. Thomas once again. Moving into the slightly meaty then paper, Money Matters Financial Monitoring Report, item number 4, still with you, Rob.
Thank you, Leader. This is the Q2 report on the financial status and monitoring here at LDC. It is taken at the end of September point, so we are 6 months into the financial year at this point. And I stress once again that these are snapshots, so they're taken at specific dates to give an indication into the financial health of the authority. To take you through the headlines, the general reserves at year end, we currently forecast to be 5.8 million. That is a £240,000 reduction from the 6 million that's in the approved budget. Largely due to a lower than budgeted contribution to our reserves in the last financial year. And we also forecast that we'll be using rather less of the reserves to balance the budget than we were originally estimating 3 months ago, because we're now expecting to use slightly under 150,000 in this year, and it was nearly 500,000 previously forecast. Our leisure centre income, which we're dealing with as a specific item because of the risk associated with it, because it's quite a large item that could potentially go very wrong, and hopefully it won't. That income is forecast to be £82,580 below budget. We will be filling that shortfall in from the reserve that we set up for that purpose with the settlement monies that Freedom Leisure paid us when they exited. I am told that footfall figures are remaining healthy, particularly in Burntwood, although perhaps a little bit lower than we may have expected at Friary Grange, which might be perhaps due to the age and the specific issues at that centre. And I'm also aware that energy costs remain very high at Friary Grange, which is something that hopefully when we replace it, we'll be able to deal with a far more economical building. The capital programme, perhaps alarmingly for those who are fresh to it, is £9.3 million below the level that we approved. But that is mainly due to those 2 major projects of the cinema and the replacement leisure centre slipping into next year. That doesn't of itself mean that the projects aren't happening or are being delayed. It just means we haven't been asked to pay any bills on them yet. And so that has slipped into the next financial year. As I mentioned in the last item, our council tax and business rate collection performance does remain very strong, and our in-year performance is broadly where we'd expect it to be at the 6-month period, and so there's not a great deal of movement either upwards or downwards at this stage. Pleased to report that our supplier payment performance metric is running at 91%, which exceeds our stated target of 90%, but is below the informal 100% target that I think we should all like to work to. And there is one main service area lagging behind the others, who are now consistently running into the mid-90s. that lower than expected performance is, I understand, likely to be addressed by a new member of staff coming into the team to handle that specific point. Our investment at the moment remains stable. The yield is above benchmarking, and the book loss, once you work in the reserve, is only £54,000. That's in Appendix D. We are considering our position on that, given the expiry of the IFRS 9 override, which would mean that any losses on strategic investments would have to be placed on our balance sheet, and that we would have to demonstrate that we have a way to deal with that. That is extremely unpalatable, I understand, to a number of local authorities, and so we are seeking advice about a likely route. But I would note that most of those holdings in external investment funds are invested outside this district. And I think we all, as a cabinet, would quite like to see that investment come back within the district, where we can actually spend the money that this council holds on the people who live here, whether that's by way of place shaping or supporting. The final headline that I think I'd like to draw your attention to is that Lichfield District Council remains a financially stable authority, and we are prepared to use our significant financial resources for the benefit of those residents and business in the district, and are taking steps to do so. On a side point, I'd give the Cabinet a reassurance that Lichfield West Midlands Traded Services appears financially sound. Officers of the company may want to give a little bit more detail if they feel it's appropriate. I would say, though, that the Disabled Facilities Grants performance is particularly heartening. Seeing that within the traded company. Members might recall in previous years we've slipped consistently around £2 million from year to year on unspent disabled facilities grants because of the poor performance of our partners. We are currently not seeing that since we've taken it back in-house, and we are seeing a radical improvement. And so thank you to LWMTS for their work on that. I'm sure there will be questions, so fire away.
Thank you very much, Councillor Strachan. Is there anything that either Anthony or Simon or Kerry wanted to bring in at that point before we move into questions? No. Okay, brilliant. Andy, over to you.
Thanks, Doug. I just got a few things for some clarification. Actually, the in Appendix C, we detail the pump track as being Fradley. I'm pretty sure we're doing that in Burntwood. But if I could just check that we all agree on that fact, and maybe amend as necessary. A pump track, by the way, it's Redwood Park is where that's going, I believe, in Burntwood, and that's an oval piece of tarmac that people can go on. It's at the early stages, but I don't believe it's Fradley. Anyway, there's also there's the resurfacing the tennis courts at Burntwood Leisure Centre. I'm assuming that's covered by the BLC sinking fund projects, I'm guessing, in there. The Zitwar in Burntwood, we had this debate at ONS. I'm pretty sure that's completed and paid, but tell me otherwise if you disagree. And a really tiny point, where we talk about paddle tennis, it's spelt PADEL, not paddle as in paddling around in your Wellington boots. Paddle as in a paddle bat thing. And just in Appendix C, just a clarification, where we talk about the council car park extension, which is what we're doing here temporarily on the corner, that's not actually an extension to the council car park to provide more spaces for the council staff. Just to be really clear on that. That is a different temporary car park for the council staff, so we can open up this car park for members of the public to use as needed while we're doing the BRS project. And just in general, I think under that Appendix C, I think it's absolutely excellent to see and I think you said the same, Rob, the number of capital projects we're currently doing are coming to fruition at the moment within this council. I think it's not just the big one. There's obviously a lot of smaller ones as well that we can see from that list. So I think that's absolutely excellent. Cheers.
Dealing with those in no particular order. Thank you for the clarification on some of the namings. On the pump track, I will look to officers for clarification on whether we have in fact done one in Fradley and whether there's a second one. It may be that the cabinet member for leisure can assist you, Councillor Smith. I wonder who that might be. I'm sure that Anthony will clear up the use of the Burntwood Sinking Fund. I believe that I saw that it was. And I agree with you, Councillor Smith, that seeing so much on this capital programme, bearing in mind that we don't put anything on here unless it's costed and ready to go, it's good to see so much movement, given that we have seen some fairly abbreviated, shall we say, capital programmes in the future. It's great to see that things are actually moving here in Lichfield. I'm going to let Anthony clear up the BLC Sinking Fund issue.
Clarify which project it is you were talking about, Councillor Smith. Was it resurfacing the tennis courts?
Yes.
I'll have to check, but I've got in my mind it might be a SIL-funded project.
It's only a minor thing. I didn't double check things we've been on there.
Great. Councillor Sebastopol.
You, a couple of items from me, if I may, and I'll probably take them in reverse order from when you were going through the list there. Again, another detailed report. In terms of the disabled facilities grants, you mentioned about awarding the contracts. The level of spend that's going through is about approximately 100k a month now that we've got. And that's obviously helping to alleviate this significant underspend that had gone through previously. Can you just clarify for me that that's an indication or a measure of the increased activity that's being undertaken, not an increase in bills being presented that's amounting up to that 100k, because that could be a significant difference, especially at the moment?
I'm going to defer to the Chief Executive on that one because I saw an encouraging nod, but I wasn't sure what it meant.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so it has taken the company a little bit of time to get up to speed, but actually we've only been running this business since April. And now what we are seeing is increased activity as well. There is a limit to the local market in terms of what can be done. So another part of LWMTS, which does major capital works, is now getting into that market as well to directly complete the adaptations on behalf of residents. And I'm really pleased to be able to share with Cabinet that this week one of our partners has asked us to start to look at our capacity to help them with the adaptations happening as well. So they've given us a couple of, I think it's about half a dozen or so to have a go at. And if that is successful, there are 50 to 70 more adaptations that they'd like us to undertake on their behalf. So that suggests significant confidence is growing in the capability of the company.
Chair, it certainly does. That's wonderful to hear on both counts on those. I think one of the overriding concerns at the moment, and that's been touched on slightly, is the position of a number of our neighbouring councils, whether they're upper tier, and certainly in a perilous position. So the statement of no significant risks, I think, is also good to be able to emphasise, and as well as the security markers that are identified in the report. Other than any massively huge curveballs that we wouldn't necessarily be able to see on the horizon, do you see that being maintained as far as we can look into the future? Thank you.
Yes, I do, barring any major curveballs. I have this evening from Anthony received the local government finance policy statement, which should dictate some of the underpinning principles in the forthcoming settlement. There is nothing in there that has given me great alarm or that Anthony has raised his eyebrows at particularly strongly. And so it would appear that certainly for the next financial year, we will enjoy relative stability. Who knows what is going to happen in the future, but at the moment we are in a healthy financial position. We don't share the problems that top tier authorities or large metros have. We're sympathetic to the issues that they face, and I suspect that some of them are completely financially unmanageable, given the pressures that exist in particularly in roads and transport, and in both adult and children's social care, which are absolutely gigantic cost centres, certainly for the county. We are not lumbered by that. We do have our own issues, but I think the hyper localism that a district can provide means that we can actually spend what we have very forensically. We can support our partners at county in developing, say, active leisure, which takes some of the pressure off the health issues that the county may face. And so I think anything that means that we can work more closely while still maintaining our own independence is going to be useful, I think.
Go for it, you may.
Yeah, thank you, and then I'll give way. the leisure centres, I said I was going in reverse order as to what I could recall. I think from previous reports that actually the amount now is significantly reduced, although that there's still obviously under where we were with the budget report. Is that the trajectory that you see continuing for that particular part? So it has shifted quite a bit.
For now, I believe so. There was a report that, or a draft report that had a very alarming number on it. That was because that report was informed by out-of-date numbers and estimates. When we actually built in what we currently see happening, the numbers became dramatically less concerning. There are still elements that are cause for concern. Many of them are in the Lichfield-based leisure centre. Burntwood currently appears to be in relative financial health, but it is survivable at that rate until we have the replacement leisure centre built, which hopefully will not quite be the solution to all of our problems, because I'm not going to be quite so glib to describe things in that way, but it protects us against some of the worst costs, particularly energy, and will hopefully bring increased footfall because it will be a far nicer centre than we currently have.
Thank you, Councillor Jack. I'm just going to ring Councillor Smith and Mr. Fletcher in on that.
Yeah, Rob pretty much said what I was going to say. Actually, I think Burntwood is definitely going in the right direction. Membership's increasing, etc. I think the current Lichfield Friary Leisure Centre, with being an old site with much higher energy costs and harder ability to attract members because of the building, etc. I think when we get I'm confident when we get the new leisure centre in place, the energy costs and the desirability to be a member there will absolutely increase. So I think I do see that going in the right direction. Yeah.
Simon.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to put some more meat on the bones, I suppose, in terms of when we started the financial year. I think we were looking at around £500,000 proposed or potential gap in revenue. That we've now reduced that to less than 100,000. I think again is incredibly encouraging, and that is primarily, it's entirely down to the increased number of members, and I think we're on about 900 members since the beginning of April this year as well that have come back to the leisure centres, which again is great news. Thank you, Chair.
That's okay. Thank you.
I wasn't going to place that number in the public domain, but I thank the Chief Executive.
Janice, for you had your questions answered. Brilliant. Okay. Mike, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. Just looking at the table at 3.5, and in particular the vacancy savings, various posts under Shaping Place and Good Council. Are they all part of the annual target? I see there's an annual target in the Good Council of 180,000. So the figures that are there, are they part of that overall target? And are they posts that are going to get refilled, or they're just posts that are vacant at this moment in time? That's the first question, please.
I'm going to let the head of paid service deal with that, given that it's his model.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so we do have an annual target. So when we have a relatively low turnover as a council, certainly this year. As last year we had a much more significant turnover associated with wanting to change the structure of the council and the type of council that we are. So we build in vacancy savings. We deliberately pause with some most of our vacancies, unless they are front-facing operational type of vacancies, for a 3-month period, and that allows us to have an annual in-year saving. To answer the question, Councillor Wilcox.
Yeah, thank you. Can I carry on?
Yeah, please.
It's really pleasing to see that the increased interest receipts that we have had on our investments are showing good. That really does help us in that place. The other one I was going to talk about DFGs. That's really good. I think it's fantastic news that we're trying to got a dedicated team working on that. That's really positive. I was going to talk the leisure. I think Janet has done that on the leisure, so fine with that. I think I'm okay for now, Mr. Chairman, but obviously come back when I've read the rest of my notes.
Absolutely fine. Yeah,
thank you.
Problem. Go on, Rob. Go straight to recommendations now.
That's it. Bearing in mind, I was navigated so far away from it that I now can't find them.
No, I was only joking. There's a couple from me if I can indulge.
Yeah, sure.
In fact, most of them have already been said, so I'm not going to repeat them. But I think 2 points on page, so at Appendix A, where we say achieved savings, and it's in the past tense. It's for the MTFS 23-24 of 1.7 million. Is that so? I'm always the cynic. We have achieved 1.7 million pounds of savings. That has been achieved and it's done, and those are not to be achieved with future activity. That's in the bag, done. So
Yes. I'd say encouraging nod to say that they are savings achieved and in the bank.
brilliant, well done. That in all seriousness, I think, and appreciating that that's made up of lots of different elements, and this is touching on points that other people have made. I think at a point where we are being ever more present in our communities, and whether that's through investing in our leisure centres or even taking leisure centres back in-house, whether it's through the DFGs, whether it's through spinning up new activities like the paddle tennis, etc. The more assistance, as you said, Councillor Sylvester Hall, to for council tax support scheme, to be able to, if we were making these savings and cutting and turning inwards, then it's one thing. But I think actually to be ever more present in our communities and still make those savings demonstrates that we're headed in the right direction. I think we don't want to be too self-congratulatory about it. There is still plenty more for us to do. Still plenty more of value that I think we ought to be seeking to add to our communities. But I think it's really impressive that we've been able to not only be more present, but also make a saving whilst doing so as well, and deliver genuine value for our residents, both in financial and non-financial terms. Councillor Wilcox, I was just padding for you then, Mark.
I'm just so thanks for that, Chairman. It's the old chestnut, really. Looking in the risk descriptions and risk owners, strategic risk SR1, C and D, C, the review of the new homes bonus regime. Original score, we had a likelihood of red, impact red, severity of risk red. That seems to have changed now. That the likelihood is still red, but the impact is yellow and the severity of the risk is yellow. Any reason why that's changed from red to yellow? And then finally, on the next one down, the business rates, we have a likelihood of red, and we know that there's obviously a lot of work ongoing with central government as to what's going to happen in relation to any consultation. And I see that still remains a likelihood red, impact red, severity red, just as those warning signals again, Chairman. But I'm interested to see the new homes bonus one, why that's moved to yellow as opposed to red previously. Thank you.
I'd imagine it's because we haven't assumed any income from it, so the impact is mitigated. But I'll hand over to the experts to answer that question for us.
Well, it may be that that can still be managed at yellow because the new homes bonus is within the policy statement that we received this afternoon, confirming that next year the government will be maintaining the approach taken in this year, which is payments for in-year completions only. And so that risk we do have a little bit more certainty of. I would imagine it's still yellow, given that there may be a wide-ranging review in the future that we don't know about. But that is where it is. So far as the localization of business rates is concerned, yes, that is something that if there is a change to business rates, that is worth certainly a seven-figure sum every year that it isn't implemented to this authority. And while it is overwhelmingly likely that at some point there will be a fairer funding review, which is certainly what it used to be called, that's been held in abeyance for, I believe, the last 6 years. So we don't know when it's coming. It's likely that it will, but in the meantime, we're going to make sure that we look after that money and make it work for us. In the eventuality that it is taken away from us and taken up to top tier authorities, then we'll have to work out what we're going to do. But we don't factor that into, or we don't take it for granted on a rolling basis. And I don't believe that we forecast. Certainly business rates retention at this rate beyond year one of the MTFS that's on its way down the line at the moment.
Great. Does that answer your question, Mark? Yeah. No. Okay. Any more questions? If not, let's move to your recommendations then, Rob.
Thank you, Leader. I move recommendations 2.1 and 2.2 standing in my name.
Thank you, Councillor Strachan. Those in favour? That's great. That's unanimous. Thank you, Councillor Strachan. I'm going to stay with you once again for agenda item number 6, which is the future of the HR function. And I think, Ms. Dove, you're assisting Rob with this one.
Yes, and I'm very grateful to Kerry for all of her support in this. In fact, to see how the document has evolved since the first draft was sent is very heartening to see the decision making be checked and rechecked, and the case for what we're planning to do strengthened. Cabinet might be aware that we've had an outsourced HR function via Stoke-on-Trent City Council, which has been in place since summer 2019. And I think we'd probably all say that while it might have been the right thing to have done at the time, it's become clear that as we as a council have changed and progressed, so must the HR function that's in place to serve us and to meet the needs of our staff. And we would assess that the current function is failing in its current purpose. It's requiring quite considerable intervention from the council's own staff to check its output. Regular errors are being reported both by staff and by members of this council within the payroll system, which breaches the bare minimum expectation that we have to pay our staff accurately, and is as such wholly unacceptable. Even were that not true, requiring significant intervention from senior members of staff being diverted from their substantive roles simply because their former expertise is HR is also not acceptable. And so we currently have an outsourced human resources function that's failing to meet human expectations and providing a significant drain on our resources. And there is no effective way to improve this within an outsourced service because we have no degree of control. You'll see in the paper we haven't been able to recruit into our own quite small HR team, most likely due to market and pay policy constraints. And so we've been unable to address it internally. And so this proposal is to remove HR from the current providers and to place it within Lichfield West Midlands Traded Services, who are our wholly owned company. Members, I would suggest there is significant merit in that proposal. As I've said, we lack the staffing or expertise to manage it in-house. But members might recall that earlier this year, we transferred 130 members of council staff into Lichfield West Midlands Traded Services under 2P, which was managed very effectively by that company, and it is proving to be a success at present. The company is also carrying out a number of other functions on behalf of the council. I suggest the synergy between the council and the company is quite clear at the moment, and this move would reduce the burden not only on the council, but also reduce some burden on the company by rationalising those costs and delivering an economy of scale by using a single provider rather than the two that we're currently using. We would also be in the position of being the company's primary client, as opposed to being one of a large number of clients if we outsource to an alternative private sector provider. The company, given that it already operates alongside the council, would be in a position to offer a wider range of services than a private sector provider who would probably only do payroll. In particular, we're looking to develop a new people strategy and deal with issues of well-being and learning and development, both within the council and the company. And so given that they're already delivering effectively on a number of other transformed services, particularly DFGs, as we've already discussed, and leisure that I've mentioned earlier, we have some confidence that they would be able to handle this very well. For the sake of completeness, we have also considered whether it will be worth partnering with one or more local authorities. However, we do understand that HR support is an issue across quite a lot of the sector, and we would be concerned that if we took that route, we'd have to accept a diminished service or potentially a service that is failing like the current one. This, if we did that, would seem to be a missed opportunity to secure the high level and premium service that we would get using our own company. And it may also present an opportunity for the company, should it be a success, to broaden its appeal and take on a commissioning model with other authorities, though, of course, that's a matter that I shall leave to the company's board as to whether they choose to make that route. Finally, and for reassurance, any movement of staff, as previously, would take place within the 2P regulations, ensuring that our staff interests are protected. I was very anxious to make sure that paragraph 4.9 was included, confirming that there is a fiduciary relationship between the council and its employees, and that a service level agreement will be in place to preserve that. To date, this has been shared with Councillor Robertson as my shadow cabinet member. He has indicated his broad support and raised one ancillary matter which is not directly connected to this, and I'll raise it with Councillor Farrell separately. But subject to your agreement tonight, the next steps is that it will be taken to Lichfield West Midlands Traded Services and subject to their acquiescence to the employee liaison group, because we do need to take on as many views of affected parties as we possibly can. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Councillor Strachan. Councillor Smith, over to you.
Thank you, Doug. Yeah, I think it's the really the right thing to do. I think it's the correct strategy. I think I really like the economies of scale we have between what we need to do in the LATCO HR wise and what we obviously have to do in the council HR wise, because the LATCO now, as I think it's getting over 150 employees, now we've taken the leisure ones on, so it's got a big requirement. So that economies of scale is absolutely great. Just to clear up one point I had, and it's just a tiny question. So just to be really clear, we currently outsource the HR function to Stoke-on-Trent, but we've also got some staff within our own council that do something as well with that, by the sound of it. We're stopping both of those, and that's going to be all done by the LATCO, just to be quite clear on that.
I think as a clarification, it's the outsourcing of payroll to Stoke, and it's purely the payroll function that's outsourced to.
Okay. And then the other point I was going to make, and you did mention it, Rob, so I'm glad you did, which is I'm glad we're not looking at partnering with other authorities. I think the LATCO doing this, and then once they're up to speed, we're doing it for our authority. I see absolutely, and I was going to say like you did, I see no reason whatsoever why they can't do the HR function for other authorities, which I agree with. Let's get the LATCO to look at that, Councillor Farrell. But then I sort of hesitated and thought, well, actually, why just authorities? Why not other organisations? It doesn't even need to be kept to authority. So I'll leave that with the LATCO board to have a look at. Cheers.
That's Councillor Smith.
I will ask Kerry to pick up on the payroll point. So far as the commissioning model, yes, I'm all for it, but let's walk before we try and run. Let's make sure it works before we try and sell it.
That's what I said.
Absolutely.
Yes, just to reiterate the point that the chair made, the outsource provision is currently payroll. And as the paper outlines, the LATCO has their payroll provider as well. So again, we're already in a position where we've got two separate contracts running. So the proposal would be we would cheaply transfer the current HR team over to the LATCO, and then a period of review would be undertaken of all elements, including the payroll provision, to put in place a better service.
Got it. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you. Councillor Wilcox.
Thanks very much, Chairman. I welcome that the paper's come forward. I'm just a query in relation to some of the HR functions that we have about health and wellbeing and staff engagement and all those sort of bits and pieces. Is it likely to see an enhancement to that sort of work and with our employees? Will they see a difference in that part of it? And then secondly, will we look to perhaps introduce some sort of employee handbook or workbook or something that can actually employees can actually look at and utilise, and also is that something that can be offered to members, elected members? Will they be able to get any sort of opportunity to in relation to health and wellbeing and that sort of part of it, please, Chair? That didn't say.
Currently, most of that work is being driven either by myself or Simon as Chief Executive and our Assistant Director for Ops and Regulation. Obviously, early in this year, package that is available to our staff. Again, that's been very much driven by leadership team. What we're hoping happens with this this transfer and then the review of services is we create additional capacity within a combined HR function to really develop this even further and faster than we currently have. But it's absolutely a top priority in terms of belonging and wellbeing and employee engagement.
And Chairman, a bit about elected members. Do they play any part in this part?
Absolutely.
And just to be clear, that's around the health and wellbeing support rather than any particular pecuniary benefit that you're talking about there, isn't it? Just to be crystal clear. Thank you. Any more, Councillor Fox? I know Councillor Wilcox.
I'm not really well, to be honest, so I was going to keep it brief. But Councillor Wilcox really summed it up. My concern is that a happy workforce is imperative, and a good HR department is the key to it. That they also have the confidence in the HR as well as their employment. So a good HR often delivers good employees. And I know that from practice where it doesn't work and it causes a very unhappy area to work in. So I welcome it for sure. I'm very saddened that mistakes were being made, obviously have been picked up for sure. But anybody that's on the receipt of a mistake it's a very anxiety time for them and for it to be resolved. If it's resolved within minutes, it's no problem. But sometimes these cases can linger on to discover exactly where the problem originated from. But I do welcome it.
Thanks, Councillor Cox. I'm genuinely really proud of what we're doing at the moment in terms of the workforce, and to build on what Councillor Cox has said about a happy workforce is what we need. I was fully expecting a letter from a minister when we offered private medical care to our staff, a la South Cambridge's 4-day working week. But I also strongly believe in the autonomy of local authorities to decide what they think is right for their local workforce. And I think this is an extension of that, and I'm fully welcome it. I think a couple of questions I do have. Why? So we're saying it's not really working at the moment. We've got a disparate bunch of services separated over different areas. So we're going to outsource it. Why would we not just bring it in-house and deal with it all in-house rather than saying it needs to go external?
As is outlined in the paper, obviously the LATCO have been investing heavily in their own HR function, with a real focus on a HR function that's fit for purpose for a modern organisation. They have a track record in delivering transformation, obviously with the leisure TUPE, which, as we've already mentioned, was a really successful TUPE transfer of a large number of staff. So they have a proven track record of being able to transform. It also, as I think other members of Cabinet have highlighted as well, offers opportunities for trading, both with other local authorities and potentially wider as well.
Brilliant, thank you, Kerry. And just one final one from me, just as a matter of assurance, I think someone touched on this earlier on, but just double checking. We are protecting all the existing rights and pension access, etc., for all staff who are being taken over in perpetuity. It's not for a 12-month period or anything like that. It's in perpetuity. Brilliant.
Yes,
I've seen
that
some
is what
nods there.
TUPE does. So that
Treble checking, Councillor Strachan. Thank you. Okay, any more questions on this paper? In which case, Councillor Strachan, I'll come back to you for your recommendations, please.
Thank you, Leader. I move recommendations 2.1 and 2.2, standing in my name.
Great, thank you. All in favour? That is unanimously carried. Councillor Sylvester Hall, you missed out. I hope that wasn't a purposeful abstention then, Janice, on the... That, does anybody have any questions on the confidential appendix? Don't ask them out loud, just tell me if you've got them. If not, I'm not going to attempt to read out the exclusion of public and press because we don't need to go into it, but if we do, I will do. No questions on it. Brilliant. Okay, in which case then, this meeting is closed. Thank you all very much for your time this evening. Thank you.